back. Okay. Let me give a quick introduction to him. I know his son pretty well. If any of you, how many of you got those Letter from Patmos DVDs? Did you get those? If you watch that first one, Ephesus, you'll see that couple there, and this man brings his wife flowers at the end. That is actually Dick, and that's he bringing his wife flowers. Oh, I'm glad I'm not speaking today. So I got to know Eric quite a bit, and when I met Eric, he's just one of the most talented people I know. And Eric is one of the filmmakers for Clear Summit Productions. And so when I got to know Eric, when I met his father, Dick, it just clicked. I thought, wow, that's where the talent came from. This man does beautiful monologues. He's going to share about a 30-minute one with us, and it's going to be kind of a celebration of Veterans Day. Are you guys ready? I'm really excited about this. So without further ado, please give a big hand to Mr. Stenbakken.
Through dark of night, a ship sailed on the water. 900 men at war, so far from home. The icy sea from Newfoundland to Greenland. A battlefield upon the ocean foam. The deadly force of enemy torpedoes then broke the eerie silence of the night, and chaos reigned as blood revealed the horror. Some men would live, but some would surely die. For chaplains, men of fervent faith, men of honor, true and brave, gave life-preserving jackets to their men. And when there were no more to give, they willed that 4 more men might live, as willingly they gave their own. Quietly they walked among the wounded, without regard for color, race, or creed, speaking words of hope to those despairing, hurrying to meet each human need. Their legacy will live throughout the ages, for chaplains who were faithful and true, who gave their all while knowing death awaited. True holy men who did what God would do. For chaplains, men of fervent faith, men of honor, true and brave, gave life-preserving jackets to their men. And when there were no more to give, they willed that 4 more men might live, as willingly they gave their own. In majesty they rode that sea of glory, giving all that any man can give, not knowing that the world would hear their story of how they died that other men might live. For chaplains with uncommon faith born to serve and born to save, stood arm in arm upon that sinking ship, dying with a prayer upon their lips.
I was there. I was on the Dorchester. Barely 18, just coming into 18, hardly old enough to shave. I kept asking, how in the world did I get here? I mean, it was cold, it was icy cold, and then suddenly it was a burning, stinking hell. How did I get here? Well, let me tell you about it. I grew up on a farm out in Colorado, a little place called Sterling, Colorado. You might not have heard of it. Most people haven't. Yeah, we were dirt poor. It's because we had poor dirt. You know, and I grew up on the farm, and Mom and Dad, well, we worked hard. Didn't have much. Like I said, we had poor dirt, and we had a bunch of sagebrush and a few cows. It was 1942, and I decided I wanted to do something different than just spending my life out here on home on the range. Well, it ain't very homely out there on the range. It's pretty bad. Anyway, I decided I wanted to do something with my life. I wanted to see the world. And, you know, my mom, she said, you're going to take typing in school. I said, Mom, typing is for girls. I don't want to take typing. She said, you're going to take typing. And so I went to Dad, and Dad said, Mom says typing, you learn to type, you know. And I hated it. Not only that, but then Mom said, you're going to take piano lessons. Piano lessons, I don't like piano lessons. I don't want to. Dad said, do it, son. And so I decided I'm going to get away from typewriters, and I'm going to get away from pianos. And I had an idea, because in 42, you know, there's a war going on. And a lot of the people were joining. And I wasn't 18. I went down to the recruiter, and he said, you're not 18, you can't join. Well, he knew me. So I come up with an idea. I went home, I took a piece of paper, and I wrote 18 on it. And took another piece of paper and wrote 18 on it, put them in my boots. I went to the next town. I said, I want to enlist. The fellow said, are you over 18? I said, yes, I am. I wasn't lying. And so they took me in. They sent me to a place called Fort Leonard Wood. It's in the state of Missouri. Now, some say Missouri, but let me tell you, if you've been there in the summer, it's misery. And if you're there in the winter, it's misery too. And 12 weeks of basic training there at Fort Leonard Wood. And man, I met some people there we lived out on a ranch out there in Colorado, and I hadn't seen many people. There were people from all different kinds of places. There was a fellow from, I said, where are you from? He said, I'm from New York. I said, New York? Where's that? He said, are you a bumpkin? Don't you know where New York is? I said, oh, New York, yeah. And he was a streetwise guy, and he was pretty tough, but we got to be good friends. Boy, I'll tell you what, I got acquainted with some people called drill sergeants. They taught me some words I'd never heard before. And I found some muscles that I never knew I had before. They worked us hard. One day we were out on the rifle range, and we were doing what they call night fire, and we were out there late, and it was wet and cold and miserable. And so they had the truck there to take us back to the barracks, and the truck wouldn't start. They couldn't get it to go. You know, they'd turn the key. And so he said, okay, the drill sergeant said, y'all going to have to march back. Well, it was about 8-10 miles back. And we're tired, we're hungry, and it's miserable cold. And I said, let me take a look at the truck. Because, you know, when you grow up on a farm, you learn to do, you know, you don't throw things away when they break. What do? You fix them, that's right. So I got to tinkering around in there, and I found a loose wire. And I said, okay, hit the thing again. Boom! Boy, it started right up. I was the hero. And we got to ride back. Next morning, Lieutenant Commander called me in. And I thought, oh, man, I'm in trouble. And I stood there. He said, you're pretty good with fixing things. Yes, sir. He said, pretty handy with your hands. Yes, sir. Can you type? Yes, sir. He said, well, I need a clerk, and I need a driver. And now I've got my driver wheeled vehicle badge here. I'd earned that. And he said, I'm going to make you a technical corporal. And I said, okay. I mean, my IQ is a little bigger than my boot size, okay? I figured if I'm working for the company commander and I'm his driver and I'm his clerk, that's a pretty good job. And so I did that. And then one day he called me in and he said, well, I got news for you. Yes, sir. He said, you're being sent to Europe. Well, I mean, this is part of my dream. I wanted to see the world. Only one little problem there. They're shooting at each other over there. So I said, okay, yes, sir, I'll go. And so they put us on a bus, and we went to New York City. And sure enough, on the bus, here's my buddy from New York. And so he took me around. We had 24 hours, and well, I mean, I'd never seen, those buildings were bigger than silos. They were amazing. And we had 24 hours until we had to report. And it was something, and we finally had to go to Staten Island, Pier number 2, I remember. And we're walking down, and we're asking people, where's the Dorchester? And they said, ooh, the Dorchester. Yeah, that's our boat. We got to report to that. He said, it's way down at the end. Now, let me tell you something about the Dorchester. It was a small boat. It was about 400 feet long and about 55 feet wide. And it was usually, before the war, it used to go up and down the East Coast, and it would take 350 people on like weekend trips. Now there are going to be 900 people on that ship. 902. 900 men, 2 women. I know some women are out there saying hallelujah, amen. But as we got down there, it was this low, squat little gray thing, and so we got on, and this Captain Hans Danielson was in charge of it. And so, January 23, we pulled out. It was cold. It was cold. That wet cold would just go through you like a knife. And we said we're going to Greenland. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know who named it Greenland, but they were lying. There's nothing green on Greenland. 3 days we got there. And it was cold. The seas were heavy. Ever been seasick? You know, those of you who haven't, first, let me tell you, first you think you're going to die. And then you're afraid you're not going to die. It was terrible, and it was cold, and it was crowded. 3 days we got to Greenland. And while we were there, we noticed there were three officers that came on. They were all chaplains. And one was a Catholic priest, John Washington. Well, I knew about Catholics because we had a little Catholic church out there, and a priest would come by once in a while. And one was a Reformed church, Clark Pauling. Well, I didn't know what needed to be reformed. He looked like he was fine to me. And another one was Methodist. Well, I knew about Methodist because we had a Methodist church in town. And then there was a rabbi. I'd never seen a Jew. I've heard about him, never seen one. He seemed like a right nice guy, too. And you know the thing of it is, these people from all these different backgrounds, these chaplains, they were best friends. They got along just fine. Well, okay, that's fine with me. And they'd come around, and they were friendly, and Chaplain Fox took note of me, and he saw that I was a driver. I'm a technical corporal. And he said to me, son, can you type? Yes, sir, I can. He said, by any chance, can you play the piano? Yes, sir, I can. He said, well, I'm looking for a chaplain assistant when we get to our place. If you'd be willing to work with me and be my driver and my typist and my assistant. And I said, yes, sir, I'll be glad to do that. I didn't know what it meant to do it, but I said, I'll be glad to, because I figured, with an officer as a boss like that, that can't be a bad thing. Well, when we got to Greenland, the chaplains organized some games, and we got some exercise and got off, and we had a good time for 3 days, and then they said, okay, we're getting back on. The whole convoy's leaving. Special Group 19, 50 ships, a mile apart. Wherever you looked, there were ships. And we said, well, where are we going? And Hans Danielson, the captain, he said, I'll announce it when we get underway. Well, when we got underway, we noticed all the ships are going that way and we're going this way. And we wondered, what's the world going on? And he came on radio and he said, going to a place called Iceland. Well, that didn't sound too inviting, but there were only 6 ships now. There were 3 Coast Guard cutters and the Dorchester and 2 other not troop ships, but supply ships. And then he said, we're going to Bluey 1 West. And the special job there, we're going to help extend the runway so planes can fly up there and then go to Europe. We're going to build a bigger radio so that we can keep track of aircraft and heavier aircraft, and they can go out and sweep that area in the North Atlantic of submarines. And we're going to protect the cryolite mines, because the cryolite mines, they were using those to make aluminum for the airplanes. And so now I understood why there were 172 civilian people on there and engineers. The 2 women were engineers. So now it began to make sense. Well, let me tell you what. We were so crowded that down inside the ship, it was hotter than it should have been. And if you go up top to try to get a little relief from the heat and the stink downstairs, it was so cold. It was so cold that when the snow would fall, it would sit right on top of the water. And the ship would be pitching and would splash, and that salt water would splash up, and it was so cold it would freeze all over the ship. You had to watch where you're walking. Well, February 2, 1943. Danielson came on the radio and he said, the Tampa, which is one of the ships that went ahead of us, the Tampa had a new thing on it called sonar. And the Tampa said, we're being followed by a German submarine. That's not good news. And then Danielson came on, that was about 3:30 in the afternoon. And about 1800 at 6 o'clock at night, Danielson came back on and he said, the submarine is still following our convoy. So when you go downstairs and you go to sleep tonight, everybody put on all your clothing and your life vest. It's about 300 degrees down there. This is wool, and I'm supposed to put this all on, and my overcoat and my life vest. Why, we couldn't do it. Well, I went to sleep as best I could. And then we woke up, some of us did, and heard that the chaplains were putting on a talent show. This is about 8 o'clock at night, and there was nothing else to do. By the way, the chaplains had different services different days. And I went to the Methodist service because Chaplain Fox asked me to help him, and that was fun to do. And then the Reformed guy, he had a service, and I went to that one. I mean, there's nothing else to do. What you can do, walk on water and get out of there? There's nothing to do. And then they had a Jewish service on a Friday night. And I'd never been to a Jewish service. And it was down in the mess hall where the people were. And they were all playing cards and sitting around. And the rabbi said he's going to have a Sabbath service there on Friday night. And the people said, oh, no, we're playing cards here. And the Catholic priest stood up for the rabbi. And he said, no, boys. He said, when the time comes, fold them up. Good chaplain's going to have a Jewish service. Well, I thought that was something. Now, here's a Catholic priest standing up for a Jewish rabbi. And It was amazing. And when the time came, I remember the chaplain, the priest, he said, "Okay, boys, this is the end of the hand." And one fellow said to him, he said, "Well, come over here and bless my hand, Pastor, Father, because this is the last one." And he stood behind him. He said, "I should waste a prayer and a pair of deuces." And that broke up the game. I mean, everybody quit then. And so I went to the Jewish service. Well, now these chaplains had put together a talent show. And let me tell you what, that priest could play the piano. I mean, he could make those keys light up. They found an old piano in the back. So we were feeling pretty good because now we're within 100 miles of Iceland. So we figured we'd be safe. Then 5 minutes before 1 o'clock on the 3rd of February, all hell broke loose. We took a torpedo on the left side of the ship. That's right where the mess hall was and where the galley was. And when the thing blew up, it killed a lot of people right out. And it severed all the ammonia lines for the coolers. And now we had gas and fire and ammonia, and your eyes would sting, and people were screaming and trying to get to the top of the deck. I finally got to the top. It was bitter cold. The ship's lights went out. The signal for distress, 7 blasts on the horn. We got 6 blasts, and the 7th one just faded out because we lost all power. And the other ships went on. You see, the rule was if a ship got hit, got torpedoed, the other ships had to go on. You didn't stop because a moving target is a harder target to hit than one that's just dead in the water. It was pandemonium. People were screaming, crying, hollering. They were wounded on the decks. We had 13 life rafts, 1 motor launch, 45 what we call donuts. They were round things with a net bottom, and 2 8x8 plywood forms floating on some big oil drums. The problem with the lifeboats was because of all the splashing and the ice coming up, the davits where they put the rope through to lower them down, they were frozen solid. I saw people beating on them with their hands. I saw one guy clawing at it to get the thing loose until you could see his bones through his fingers. He'd ripped his flesh off because the ship was sinking and people were terrified. Finally, they got one boat down. I remember one fella went to the edge and he jumped in the boat from the top. When he hit it, he went right through the bottom of the wooden boat. And then somebody got the idea on the boats, look, if we can get enough people on the lifeboat, we'll break the ice and we can lower it down into the water. So people got on board and they overloaded it, and the davit did turn loose, but only the one on the front. It just dumped them all into the ocean. The ship was tipping more and more. Finally, one of the mess stewards from down below, crazy man, came screaming up the deck, swinging a big meat cleaver, telling people, "Get out of my way." Lieutenant shot him dead right there. I saw it. We had life vests in lockers up above, and chaplains were handing them out. And finally they said, "There are no more." You see, a lot of us had come up, we just left stuff down below. You couldn't get down below. It was a raging, burning hell. And here I am on the boat now with the sinking ship, and I have no life vest. A life vest like this one. I saw Chaplain Good, the rabbi, take off his vest and put it on a wounded man. Then he took off his gloves and he gave them to Lieutenant Mahoney. Mahoney said, "Sir, no, you need these." And he said, "No, you take them." Mahoney was one of 2 people in one of those donut things. There were 40 people on board. Only 2 survived. Mahoney said those gloves saved his life. Then I heard Chaplain Fox. He said, "Here, son, take my vest." "Sir, I can't do that." He said, "That's an order, take my vest." And he took it off and he put it on me. I said, "Sir, I can't." He said, "No, you will." I stood at the edge looking down at that cold water. And then I felt a hand on my back He patted me and then he pushed me. When I hit that water, it was like 10,000 needles going into my skin. It was so cold. I could hardly breathe. I knew I had to get away from the ship. Swam as fast as I could. Got to one of those donuts. The people said, "No, we're too full. Push him away, push him down." And they did. And finally, two hands grabbed the vest and they pulled me up on the top of the pile. 45 minutes later, the Escanaba turned around, came back. About 2 hours later, another ship came, the Comanche. On the Comanche, there was two men, Swanson and another man, a black man. He kept diving into the water. Charles David was his name. He swam to me, grabbed me, and pulled me in. When we got to Greenland, I went to the hospital. I visited Charles David. He caught pneumonia, saving people. He died. 4 chaplains gave their lives that 4 others could live. I was one of the 4 that lived. You see, when I was in the water, we had these, and we'd been instructed how to turn them on. As far as I could see, there were blinking red lights. They were supposed to help people come and save you. But after a while, the kapok in these vests became weighted down and they became death traps. Well, my life was saved because of the chaplain, because of Charles David. You know, folks, there are only 2 people who ever put their life on the line to save you and give you freedom. One is a person who wears a uniform. That person puts their life on the line to give you freedom here and now. Don't forget to say thanks. And there's another one who died to give us freedom forever, and that's Jesus Christ. Here's the Bible that Chaplain Fox gave to me. John 5:15, John 15:12 and 13. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I've loved you. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lays down his life for his friends. Military people do that for you. Jesus does that for you. Freedom is not free, but in Jesus, freedom is forever. Give your life to Him, because He will save you. I'll never forget that night. And those who died that I might be free. And I hope you'll never forget either, especially Him who gives you freedom forever.